What movie is so disturbing you would never watch it again? I can't remember what it's called, but it was based off the true story where that girl was hitchhiking and got kidnapped and lived in a box for 7 years. Wasn't it called The Girl in the Box or something along those lines? Edit, it's called Girl in the Box. I read the book about it and was disturbed for months. It seriously messed up my view of other humans. There were so many ways they were doing this all in broad daylight, and nobody knew the truth. I started wondering who around me was secretly being held captive, or might have a slave in the backyard. Old one, but it's seared in my memory. The cook, the thief, his wife and her lover. I actually paid to see it in the theater. I don't know what I was thinking. I saw this in my early 20s and came back to it as an older, wiser adult. It's visually brilliant and emotionally devastating. We now think of Michael Gambon as Dumbledore, forgetting how tall and physically imposing he is. And we now think of Helen Mirren as prim and proper QEII, forgetting how excellent her emotional performances are. There's no extraneous detail or character interaction in this movie. It's highly regarded, so I won't say it's underrated, but I do think it is often overlooked in must-see movie lists. It is such a masterpiece. I'd never heard of it before this thread. Watched it tonight. It's really quite powerful. I love the music. I like the theater sort of style of the sets. By the way guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It will help us out quite a bit, and if you don't enjoy the videos in the future anymore, you can always unsubscribe. Let's get back to the video. Grave of the Fireflies. Highly recommend this to most people who can handle it. I think it does a phenomenal job of showing the atrocities of war and helps us remember the human cost. It is a sad movie, but I think I'm much more empathetic to others who live, or lived, this reality. It's a beautiful movie that I'd advise people to watch exactly once. It's not a movie that's easily forgotten. Showed this movie to my girlfriend once, and she cried for a good 15 minutes easily. Easily one of the saddest films I've seen. Sallow. Edit, since this is one of the top comments, I'll add a film I just thought of, In a Glass Cage, Trats el Crystal. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a 1988 Spanish film about a former sadistic Nazi who is now paralyzed and living in an iron lung. This is one of the few movies that left me with a visceral reaction of disgust. It's not overtly gory or gruesome, but Jesus is it dark. The atmosphere of the film itself is also so oppressive and bleak. I legitimately think this movie is written up to me more disturbing than it actually is. At any rate, I think people's obsession with people eating sort of jumps around what the actual point of the movie is. There can be no true love under power. It's really a film about how authoritarianism corrupts even the most basic human desires into something hideous. The actual horrifying thing about Sallow isn't the murder, it's that the world is actually full of powerful people who are just as the people in that film. I'd like to say Martyrs, 2008, but chances are I'll rewatch it sometime. Then again, I've been meaning to rewatch Watership Down, 1978, and have not managed to bring myself to it, so. Edit, if you're going to check out Martyrs, don't read about it. Go in blind like I did. I worked with Pascal Laugier, the director of Martyrs, on one of his follow-up films. Deeply respected the guy going in, and advocated quite a bit to work on his film. About 3 to 4 weeks later, I had lost all respect for him. That guy. He's a pervert, a sadist and an all-around piece of human being. 2 weeks straight of women being beaten, bloodied and tortured. It was fake, of course. The director spent countless hours on the torture scenes, pushing the actresses to their absolute emotional limits to scream and cry as much as possible. It's really hard to describe what it is like experiencing multiple women crying and screaming for several hours a day, 2 weeks in a row despite being fake. It really affects you. One of the higher up crew members quit because she claimed she caught him rubbing his through his pants during one of these scenes while behind the monitor. Nobody else claims to have seen it. The worst was when the lead actresses fell through a glass window on the last day of production. Wasn't safetied. Wasn't stunned glass. Wasn't in the script prior to director telling her to pound on it. Glass shatters. She was sliced neck to ear across her face. I was there. She's screaming bloody murder for her life. Glass barely missed her artery, as we were told later, and Pascal Lorgia turns to his first assistant director and director of photography and whispers fairly nonchalantly, "When can we start shooting again?" Within several hours the movie was done shooting and all them are hugging, celebrating, shaking hands. I felt I had PTSD for months after working on that film. The White Christmas episode of Black Mirror. It's not a movie, but it has more plot than most movies. It's not even about gratuitous gore, it's mostly psychological and hid paranoias I didn't know I had. Also you can watch it without seeing any other part of the series. I was thinking of White Bear when reading this. That one was tough too. That episode bothered me for weeks afterwards. I went into it unspoiled, and afterwards, I felt like I'd been poisoned. I understand what the statement the story is making, and I can never see it again. Freaking awful. Come and see. It is a WWI movie that focuses on a young boy who joins the Soviets to fight the Germans. And the scenes in that movie are so horrific. There is one scene that involves a barn being burned that my mind still flashes to and makes me sick to my stomach. That movie has been described to me as a war movie without any glory. So basically it's just the death and destruction, nothing else. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'd be able to handle that. It's an incredibly accurate portrayal of what went on during WW2 in that area, and that's what makes it so horrifying. I honestly consider it to be a movie everyone needs to see. Yes, it will make you feel terrible, but not enough people understand what humans are capable of doing to each other. This isn't even ancient history. This all happened relatively recently and absolutely can happen again. The more who understand that, the less likely it is to occur. Threads. Up until a few years ago I'd have said the same. I was shown the entire film in school and had vivid nightmares for years. Instead of being paranoid about being vaporized without warning at all times, I started to look into the Cold War as a subject. I'm a bit obsessed now, and having rewatched Threads many times, it's an excellent film. The tiny details in it during the build-up showed just how much effort went into it. I completely understand why you wouldn't want to watch it again, but as a cultural icon it's superb. The actress who played the woman who pissed herself when the bomb went off trained at RADA for 5 years and her IMDb has only one entry. Woman who urinated, uncredited. Sad profession, acting. Apocalypse Now. I know a lot of people love it, but the scene where the family is hiding something and so the soldiers kill them all and the something turns out to be a puppy. I just wanted existence to be done after that. Eater, I feel I need to add this. I by no means think the entire movie is disturbing. However, for me, that was the moment that I was done. I watched the whole thing and there's some truly amazing moments in the acting, directing, and cinematography. For me, though, those parts were not enough to justify the disturbing parts. There are other reasons I'm not a huge fan of it, but, like many commenters who feel the need to defend their liking the film, those reasons are not relevant to the question. I can recognize the importance and impact of Apocalypse Now, and appreciate it, and its place in film history, and still be disturbed by that, or any, scene. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Also, thank you for the awards, dear Nonnes. My dad took my mom to see it for their first date. She didn't know what she was in for, plus was not a fan, especially because it was so long, plus she doesn't even like war movies. She used to jokingly say that she should have taken this as a sign. The Girl Next Door, 2007. This movie turned me into an emotional zombie for days after. It's amazing, but don't watch it. The part that really messed me up was learning that it was based on a true story far too closely. The people that committed those horrific acts, some became family counselors and educators. The mom got parole. No one did their time. People serve more time for marijuana possession. My mind immediately went to the Elisha Cuthbert movie with the same title and was thoroughly confused. Then, after reading your description, I realized there definitely is another film with the same title. Clockwork Orange. I know it maybe isn't as depraved as some things out there, but I've never felt the same thing from watching anything else. You should read the book. The movie is based on a version, released in the US, that is missing the last chapter. The last chapter changes everything. I believe many print versions of the book also omitted the last chapter, and to my mind the last chapter ruins the entire book. Changes it from a fascinating exploration of crime and punishment, rehabilitation vs retribution, into a coming-of-age tale about a troubled, but largely ordinary teenager. Just awful. Honestly, Hereditary and Midsommar. They portrayed mental illness graphically and perfectly that it caused me to dissociate and cry for hours after watching. If you have mental health issues, watch those at your own risk. I'm not sure why, but I was okay with Hereditary and I would watch it again. I will never watch Midsommar again, and I hate even thinking about it. I feel the opposite way. Hereditary makes me feel so strange. I don't think a movie has ever made me feel like that. Cold, empty, and sad. I can't do it again. Midsommar was weird, but it was a really beautiful film with bright colors. I appreciated that. Hereditary does have that effect on you. I didn't think it was so great after I watched it, but then I could not stop thinking about it for days. Cold, empty feelings, not to mention being scared random naked old people would be hanging out in my house in the dark. I haven't been so scared and thought of a movie like that in years. For me it was Schindler's List. It's a vastly important movie to watch as I think it really helps people grasp the severity of the Holocaust, but that movie deeply disturbed me. Only thing that was worse for me was when I went to the Holocaust Museum / Memorial in D.C. I cried so hard I puked. Edit. The memory of the above two things reminded me of the boy in the striped pajamas my brother and I watched this movie. I must have been like 15 and him 12. And by the end we just hugged it out sobbing. A senseless waste of life. Then you realize that it was on such a vast scale. Haven't watched that movie since. I'm now 26. That movie was so draining. Being amongst all that insanity where Jews aren't people and they were treated like animals was truly emotionally scarring, and I'm not even Jewish. When they were liberated at the end it felt like a huge weight just being lifted. Spielberg did a lot of good with this movie, not taking a salary, donating everything it makes to charities and even refusing to sign any materials relating to this movie. The end scene broke me. I could have got more. Dancer in the Dark, emotionally just brutal. Crushed me, never want to see again. Event Horizon was deeply disturbing. Wolf Creek marked the beginning of utterly without hope of survival films and end of more fun horror films like Scream, and I never ever want to watch Bleak again. Thank Babybel Tucker and Dale came along to save the day. I had to take off a day of work after watching Dancer in the Dark. Jork refuses to act again after the way she was treated by the director of that film, who is notoriously an she spit in his face during filming. Beautiful horrible movie. Kids is another one I only ever needed to see once. Those dogma directors have a way of making uncomfortable. I went scrolling through this thread looking for Dancer in the Dark. I had to watch it for class and I don't think I'll ever go near it again. If you are looking for disturbing movies, then most films by Gaspar Noé would fit the bill, although I have watched them multiple times, because apparently I hate myself. There is also Antichrist by Lars von Trier, which is physically sickening, and Mother by Darren Aronofsky, which, if you can look past the blatant, in-your-face religious symbolism, is an amazing, claustrophobic home invasion horror that gave me pure anxiety. A few other noteworthy disturbing but amazing movies are Sallow, Dogtooth, Killing of a Sacred Deer, Suspiria, 2018, and Funny Games. Thanks for listening to my essay. Apparently I need therapy. Edit. Somehow I forgot about unedited footage of a bear, which is a short film you can find on YouTube. I won't spoil it, but for some reason, it disturbed and terrified me so much that I still wake up and think about it in the middle of the night and have to sleep with the light on like a baby. Anything similar to the Saw movies. It's disgusting. I don't get why people like it. As a fan of horror including exploitation films both old and new school, Saw being part of the latter, it's simple. The films are horrifying to me. There is a certain amount of talent to be said for that can create realistic gore and violence, and even more to be said for filmmakers that can frame it well. That being said, I also appreciate the trashier end of the genre for the filmmakers' goal to even make the film in the first place, a Serbian film ahem. The first Saw movie is actually a fairly good movie. It's not Oscar worthy or anything, but it had an interesting concept, a serial killer who wants to help his victims appreciate life, with an interesting twist. It's the stupidest film ever, but Megan is missing. Horrible acting, terrible cinematography, bad dialogue, cheesy as but the last 22 minutes of that film had me seriously up that I have never watched it since. If you choose to watch it, I would look it up first and read, because the content of the film can be very triggering to people who've experienced similar trauma. Oh man, I thought the last bit was amazing. Everyone mentions the barrel scene, but the part that got me was the slow burial. No cuts, just constant, the fading sound of her cries. So terrible. The fact she tried to Stockholm syndrome her way out as well. I also got chills thinking about how she was literally stuck in that barrel with Megan's body till she died. Yeah, the barrel scene, where the friend opens it, that's what me up. I almost puked. That image is burned in my mind forever. Other than the last part though, the movie is awful. In terms of acting anyway. Frozen, and no, not the Disney movie. I'll let it go any day of the week. Now I'm talking Frozen about the people who get stuck on the ski lift. Human error, not a or dead just a thing some dumb kid could accidentally do somehow. It's just surreal. Movie I watched years ago that I cannot remember the name had a premise like this. They were up north in a makeshift igloo and a couple is trying to stay warm as they are suffering from hypothermia. Anyways, they both start hallucinating, as one does when they are near the end stages, and the entire movie up until the end is their hallucination. In the last scene we see rescuers digging their bodies out of the snow. The road. You mean the movie that got me banned from picking out any more movies at my house. It's such an excellent movie and book though, probably not much of a date night flick though. I suppose. I never watched the movie. The book was given to me by my wife at a last Christmas together. This Christmas there was no gift for me to open. Not even a pair of socks. A couple hours later she runs out to the grocery store for some missing food and gives me the book she forgot to wrap. I should have taken that as a bigger sign than I did. Especially with how the book starts out. Millie and me. What? Why? It's a great 45-minute movie that I always turn off when the dog starts looking kind of old. There's this website, doesthedogd.com, that I frequently use to check whether I want to watch a movie without having my soul crushed. Yeah, one time my mom and I were watching it, and it was going to get sad soon, so I told her I wasn't going to put myself through that, because I've already seen it, and I went to my room. I came out shortly after, because she liked my idea, and changed the channel lol. Eden Lake. This is always my answer to this question. I saw it on a whim. Awful. I've a strong gore stomach, but this was a turning point in my life watching horror movies, where I accepted I can't handle heartless and senseless violence and new special effects. I rewatched it to show someone else how terrible it was. There's just no happiness in it at all. I did the same thing, they didn't appreciate it. When I first watched it, it stayed with me for so long. Film. I think I got 5 minutes into Don't Cats and had to turn it off. His YouTube videos did it for me. I knew I could never watch the whole thing. Oh, I watched the whole documentary. It was awful, but fascinating. Spoilers BTW, you find out he was literally mimicking horror movies he's seen, and that's why he did a lot of the stuff he said he did. Eventually he got caught though. I'm glad he got caught, and I'm all about spoilers BC. I can't watch these kinds of things. They haunt me though. Honestly, the scene at the very end haunted me. Not for the way the filmmakers intended, mind you. The level of cringe was groundbreaking. A Netflix documentary called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. It shows a lot of child abuse. It was so disturbing I had to watch it in segments and fast forward through parts. I was trying to remember his name but couldn't. This should be higher up, it's just so upsetting. I like to watch documentaries while working on my assignments. It didn't take long after turning this one on to forget about my schoolwork altogether and just watching horror. I couldn't make it through that one. I feel guilty about that because he deserves for people to bear witness to his pain, but that was so awful. I just couldn't keep watching. Poor baby. Splice. Just. Ike. Had to scroll way too far to find this. I watched this thinking it was a horror film in the traditional jump scare sense, got through it with only mild disgust, wondering when it would get scary. Then I tried to go to sleep and just cried and shivered instead. I've never seen anything remotely like this, and I don't want to. The premise was already sketchy, but then when that one person had with, and then with that scene, I was like, oh no. This one watch was enough. Sometimes I'll randomly watch the clips of Dren on YouTube, but I don't go past it being a child, because then it makes me uncomfortable. Bananas, a love story. It is a documentary about a girl who was brutally murdered by her family for eloping in what is commonly referred to as an honor killing. It's a devastating film. There is a scene where the lead investigator reads a transcript the police acquired via phone tapping. The transcript is of one of the murders bragging to his cousins about the gruesome details of the murder, and it's extremely difficult just to hear the word said out loud. Honestly, it makes me want to retch just thinking about it, so be warned if you haven't already seen it. I saw that a series about this case was released this year, named Honor or something like that. Just reading a sum up was enough. I haven't seen this movie, but I know that the most disturbing part is that this stuff actually happens in real life. Black Swan. I know it's not a scary movie or gory at all, but as a kid who was in a pre-professional ballet program, the whole thing just up so much that I quit ballet like a month later because I just couldn't do it. I watched it as a teenager with my mom one night and we were both so disturbed afterwards, also realizing it wasn't scary or anything, but we were just so uncomfortable through most of it. I was watching this movie during a hurricane with my husband, and somehow the psychological pain / stress / torture of it all just got to me. Maybe because I'm a perfectionist in my studies, so I related on that level. I felt nauseous and almost passed out. I had to ask my husband to pause it halfway through. Bridge to Terabithia. I watched it when I was young, and I couldn't believe that a story could end like that. It was the first death in a story that got to me. Me too. I remember being devastated that there wasn't a happy ending, but at the same time I think it's good to have a kids movie like that, which is realistic in depicting death and grief. The author of the novel wrote it after her son's friend was struck by lightning and killed. She wrote it basically to help kids deal with death and loss. In the novel you can easily see the main character going through the stages of grief. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed watching this, you might as well watch these too.